Cosmic Cuppa with Jude. Cuppa's at the ready, so we can all take a beautiful sip of this evening. And I would love to introduce you to a very dear friend of mine, Reg Turner. How are you, Reg?
So far, so good. Aging well, but aging. Now heading to 84. That's old enough.
Well done. Reg,
Yep.
I would like to read out your bio,
Okay.
which I have briefed a little because you've given me a beautiful, beautiful memoir. So I've
Well,
shortened it, but then we can fill in the gaps with the questions I'll ask.
okay. Yep.
So here we go. Reg was born on the Caribbean island of Aruba in 1940, crossed the Atlantic twice in wartime in naval convoys. In 1952, he says, my family emigrated to England, to their country of birth, and settled in Bournemouth, an English seaside town. I was placed in an English grammar school by passing the foreign entry exam, not the 11 plus. I got all my GCEs, gained university entrance to the London School of Economics in 1960. I was awarded an RAF pilot scholarship at 17 years of age and obtained a pilot's license. I decided not to go to university and joined the RAF as a pilot officer in 1961. I served on the Avro Shackletons, a granddaughter of the Avro Lancaster, famous bomber in World War II, for 8 years during the Cold War. Having finished my 8-year tour of duty, I applied for a job with the East African Flying Doctor Service and ended up on the cover of the biography of this service called Angels on Runway 07. Did 2 years and returned to the UK and completed a flight instructor course and went adventuring to the island of Antigua in 1968. I started out as a marketing manager of a luxury motor yacht, selling tours around the island. My job was visiting the 5 luxury hotels to sell the tours. One of these hotels was called Galley Bay, owned by an eccentric American woman called Edie Albrecht. She invited me to skip her yacht, which was chartered to guests called White Magic. My time there is well covered in the book Don't Stop the Carnival by Herman Wouk. I was next given a full-time job as a flying instructor for Antigua Aviation, a private flying club on the island. There I taught the first native antigen to go solo. His name is Malcolm James. When I was replaced by another pilot called Brian Lacoma from England, who became a legend in aviation, I departed Antigua in 1972 to come to New Zealand and visit my parents and 3 siblings who had emigrated in 1961 when I had already my commission to the RAF and an 8-year engagement. My time in the RAF based in Gibraltar is full of stories. My post-Air Force life had me wanting to build a fishing lodge. However, still loving flying, I had to upgrade my license to a commercial pilot license. The challenge now was to plan my future, as New Zealand was to be my final residence. I had two goals. One was to get a job as a commercial pilot, and the other to build a fishing lodge on a lake. Whilst trying to get a position as a commercial pilot, I had to get my New Zealand commercial pilot's license. This meant sitting the written papers, air, law, theory, and practical tests. They were covered by my PPL and instructor license gained in the UK after leaving the Africa Flying Doctor Service. As an ex-RAF navigator, the NAV exam was waived, as was the meteorology exam. I was a T-MET instructor in the RAF on Coastal Command. I then saw how I could use my instructor skills by owning a flying school, Ardmore Flying School. With my flying history in the Royal Air Force, my instructor training in the UK, and my bush flying in Africa, I was a well-qualified person to teach student pilots. So suddenly I was self-employed again as a CFI of my own flying school, renamed it Ardmore Flying School after the airfield it was operating from. It was run down and had no goodwill, so it was quite a challenge to build it up. I was able to rent one of abandoned teachers' training school college houses on the airfield, so it was easy to commute to my job. One day, Hans Boot, who was renting one of my cabins at Lake Tarawera, asked me if I would sell it to him. I had by now been using my two rented cabins as security and had increased my houses to 4. I said to him these were for my retirement fund, but if you could find me a better investment, I would sell it to you. He said there's a property up for sale on Lake Tarawera. I will take you out there. So he did, and I was shown this empty house, dead rats and possums inside, and obviously abandoned. But what I saw was my future fishing lodge and the most beautiful peninsula jutting out into the lake with a lagoon behind. Now, 3 months later, I'd sold my property at Lake Tarawera and the flight school and owned the most desirable property of all the lakes in the Rotorua district. So I think that's probably enough for the moment to talk about your bio, except to say that Reg is also a well-known New Zealand artist. And behind him, if you would allow us to see Reg, is one of his beautiful paintings. So talking about Reg as an artist, at the age of 12, his family were in England. With no formal art training, Reg won a number of art competitions whilst at school. He developed his own way of painting, mainly seascapes inspired by J.M. William Turner, often called the Apostle of Light, and credited with founding the abstract impressionist movement at the beginning of the 20th century. Now settled in Golden Bay, he's focused on abstract impressionist and spontaneous creations in acrylics and oils, many with the marine theme. And he's also owner of a beautiful luxury lodge called Song of the Tui, a bed and breakfast in Golden Bay. So Reg, can you tell us about your place of birth and your early years?
Okay, well, the place of birth was a little island called Aruba in the Caribbean, so tiny that when you rolled out of bed, you fell in the sea. One of the smallest islands. It was owned by Holland and was one of three, the ABC Islands, Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. I was born there during the war, as I said. My parents, being English, my father's job allowed him every 2 years a holiday in England. And so at the age of 3, I did my first transatlantic in the middle of a convoy in 1943. And I was taken ill. And my brother was born by then, my brother John. He was still a baby. And the whole ship was brought to alarm. We were going through a fleet of submarines. There were two ships torpedoed either side. They thought we might be in danger. So the whole passenger ship was asked to go up on deck with life jackets on and be prepared to abandon ship in case we were hit. Well, luckily, we weren't. And I survived that transit and arrived in England. And I did cross the Atlantic 5 times during that wartime period. And it was very exciting coming into England from a lovely tropical island and being in the middle of a war, with bombs going off and air raid sirens. So it was quite an interesting childhood. And so that was roughly what it was like. I was brought up at an American school. I spoke with an American accent. I was just like a little Yankee kid because the island was controlled by the American education system and owned by the oil company Esso, Standard Oil, and Shell. And so that they owned the island basically because they were the biggest oil refining producers in the Caribbean and were so until 1962 when we were beaten by one of the huge oil refineries in the Middle East and one in Texas. So there I was born on the largest producer of oil in wartime, the Largo Colony Esso oil refinery on the Dutch island of Aruba. So that was my childhood. The rest of it was being brought up like an English boy in England and learning to be post-war Britain. And one of the starting off was my grandmother's farm in near Wallingford, which was just out of the Benson Aerodrome. And one day a mosquito crashed in the farm paddock and came to a grinding halt outside the farmhouse. I was only about 5 at the time. The war was over because the war ended in 45. Anyway, that was when I decided, I want to go and fly an airplane. So that's another interesting experiment. And a plane crashing on my grandmother's farm and skidding to a halt, breaking up and was made of wood. And I remember saying
Wow.
to Dad, my God, that airplane's made of wood, which of course it was, a mosquito. And today we've just gone and rebuilt one. It was at Wanaka this year from scratch, a wooden flying mosquito.
So
Yeah.
was this during wartime, Reg?
Well, it was during wartime that I crossed the Atlantic twice. Well, 4 times, once over back there. So actually 4 times. Till finally coming home in 1952 to settle in England. And I've been back twice to Aruba, but it's all changed. The refinery shut down, all the village that was brought up in the colony knocked down, just back to coral. Very sad. Even the school I used to go to was all knocked down, all gone, all history.
Wow.
Yeah,
Strange
but
how things change so much. Reg,
terribly.
you were awarded an RAF pilot scholarship at
Correct.
17 years of age
Yep.
and joined as a pilot officer. Could you talk about this time, please?
Okay, well, I was at school at the time, and the RAF was recruiting. And if you passed the medical test, they would give you a free flight, if you like, or a free pilot's license. And we learned to fly on Tiger Moths. And I remember all my schoolmates were driving motorbikes and having cars. I didn't have a motorbike or a car, but I could take my girlfriends for a flight in an airplane. I felt so cool. So that was where I really realized I was going to fly. And although I was awarded a place at London School of Economics, which I should have gone, I discovered that entry that year was Mick Jagger, David Frost, and a few of the other English TV stars. No, I decided to not go to university, and I wanted to go direct entry to the RAF and won a scholarship to learn to fly at the age of 19. And I went through my pilot's training, and then I was sent navigator because they were short of navigators, and I ended up being a navigator on the Shackletons for 8 years, based at Gibraltar, the best posting in the world. So I loved it. But I did my 8 years, still anxious to get back flying. I did as much partying as I could in the RAF. But when I came back went to Antigua went to the Flying Doctor Service, I flew the whole of that commission on what's called a private pilot's license. I wasn't even commercial, but I was working as a volunteer to a charity, being paid £5 a week, but giving food accommodation. Covered the whole of East Africa, Tanzania, Uganda. Was there with the Entebbe raid when what was his name came in, and oh, it was a hell of a big fight. There was the Kenyatta was then king of Uganda of Tanzania of Kenya. He was the prime minister, Jomo Kenyatta. Yeah, I was there during the end of the wars. What was the war called now? The War of Independence, when the Africans all fought for independence from the crown. Then left Africa, came back to England, did a formal flight instructor's rating with the view to wondering what to do, and ended up in Antigua as I mentioned in that little brief. I was having a lot of fun with life, just living. I wasn't doing studying. I wasn't focused on a career. I was just enjoying being young, but learning a lot about the world, how to take on responsibility, how to be an entertainer. And whilst I was in Antigua, I was a social host of a luxury lodge. That was my grounding, eventually to build one in New Zealand. And the story of how I got that, of course, is another story. But that was lucky. Yeah, so basically, I did all my training in Antigua, my flying training, my hosting rich and famous people on this luxury island to set me up, being a self-engaged entrepreneur, taking gambles wherever, risking food, risking everything. Yeah.
So, would you like to talk a little bit about your time in Antigua when you were a marketing
Okay. Yeah.
manager of luxury
Well,
motor yacht selling tours
yeah, we did
to
three
the
things at
five
once. First of
main
all,
to the
yeah,
five main luxury hotels?
yeah.
And
Now,
can you
Antigua
talk
was very,
about your time with the Hotel Galley Bay and your
yeah.
involvement at that time?
Okay. Well, what happened was I went out there initially as a marketing manager for a luxury launch, had a falling out, and then Edie Albrecht was the wife of a Dutch German guy who bought and ran this Hotel Galley Bay. It was the top end of the high end market, and I became her social host, skipper of her yacht, and general factotum. Thoroughly enjoyed myself. I was chartered by the yacht to the rich and famous. I ended up paying for my own boats, and had a water sports business. And really, my life in Antigua was in the book Don't Stop the Carnival by Herman Wouk. Now, I wasn't there, but when you read that story, you can picture me being the beach boy, the beach boy. I was living the beach boy life as written in a book by Herman Wouk. Um, yeah, I had a wicked time there until I eventually left to come back to New Zealand. So I spent 4 years in Antigua, just enjoying life, meeting rich and famous, going to America. I was dated by a Broadway star, flown back to America to be oh God, that's another story. Yeah, I had a lot of fun in Antigua, playing with the rich and famous and getting confidence in being a social host. I was able to mix with everybody without being fascinated by them all. I was just, an ordinary guy knowing these people. That was a great help in entertaining people of that high level. I wasn't awed by them. I entertained Margaret Thatcher's son, Mark Thatcher. Um, and I had entertained English lords and ladies, and they just called me Reg, and I just called them Maggie or whatever. It was a really interesting attitude, living a high-end life away from the source, like American or England. They were all very natural people in Antigua. A great leveler. Yeah,
It would be a
a
great
lot of
leveler.
memories.
You also
Sorry?
had time, as you said, based in Gibraltar. Would you like to
Well,
share some of your stories from that time?
okay. Well, when I got posted to Gibraltar, my first job was learning to learn Spanish. I had a little car and we'd go up the Costa del Sol and meet the Spanish people in the Spanish villages. the one of importance was Torremolinos. It wasn't even developed back in 1960. It was just a little fishing village. Now it's a big international resort. But every weekend, every moment I had, I would go up to Torremolinos, to the Spanish bars, go to the beaches, and I met a Spanish called Mikel Campoy, who owned a motel. So he let me stay there just because I was his mate. Um, I would then have my little car and drove to the American Air Force Base of Rota and made friends with a young American officer called Dennis Stone. And I joined their flying club. And I was flying as a third national, having to pretend I was an American because the Spanish didn't like Gibraltar, didn't like English, but the Americans were the big base. I spent many of my fun times over at the American Air Base Rota with a friend called Dennis Stone. He owned an airplane, and we flew it all over Spain. And I had to speak with an American accent and pretend I was an American. That's really quite interesting. But Gibraltar was a great posting. From there, we were posted out to Cyprus, Malta, Borneo, Singapore, doing a lot of colonial flying. We were involved in the Radfan War, which was Yemen attacking the British base in Aden. We had to fly out with bombs and bomb the Yemens. Oh, God. And on one raid with Howard Wilson, was then Prime Minister of Britain, all secret, a secret war. It's called The War That Never Was. There's a book out there. We were bombing the Yemens, trying to keep them contained. They were expanding. Word got out. We were on a full loaded raid with 1,000-pound wartime stock to bomb a Yemeni village. And we were called back. Sorry, you have to abort. The press is out. They've got it in England. We're having another battle. So we had to abort the flight. It jettisoned the bombs. They all exploded during impact, which meant they weren't safe. Yeah, that's another story. The war that never was, the Yemeni war, bombing the Arabs. But
Wow,
yeah, that was my last posting.
that's
After that, I was sent
fascinating.
to yeah.
Would you
No, I had
speak
a great
about
life.
would you speak
Yep.
about the South Pacific Airlines of New Zealand,
Oh,
SPANS,
right. Yeah.
and your
Oh,
involvement when you had a brief sabbatical in New Zealand, which it seems like that was a sad part of our history. Could you talk about that, please, and your involvement?
yeah. Now, my parents by now had emigrated to New Zealand, but there I joined the Air Force. In 1965, I wanted to come back and visit them, but I wanted to fly. And I was flown by the managing director of Spans Airlines with a view to joining them as a pilot when I left the RAF. Anyway, I flew all over New Zealand with Spans Airlines with their director, whose name was on the tip of my tongue. And I said, yep, I'm going to go home back to New Zealand, in England, resign from the RAF, and come and join your airline. And he said, well, we wouldn't want to have you as a pilot. We'd rather have you as a political survivor. We're having difficulty with the NAC, and they're trying to bankrupt us because we're too competitive. Come back and we'll send you to Wellington to fight for our survival. I wasn't allowed to resign my commission. And sadly, by the time I left the Air Force, Spans was liquidated that year, 1965, closed down, and it's hardly ever talked of. It really is sad. Spans Airlines was a very important part of New Zealand history, and very little is written about it. And I was there for a moment in time, flying the DC-3, just hopefully joining them, but never allowed. But that was my coming home. I then knew that when I left the Air Force, I was going to come to New Zealand. But it took me another 4 years because I went to Antigua, became a beach bum. So by the time I arrived, I've been away from my family for 13 years. I was like the prodigal son coming home and joining from scratch. But really, the background I had and all the adventures I had helped me establish the first luxury lodge, Solitaire, at Lake Tarawera, and my career as a lodge host and property developer. And now I've got this little lodge, which is really just a small bed and breakfast, but it's my retirement home. And now I'm trying to write my memoirs. And I think basically what I've written to you is just a start. I've been able to do a sketch. That's cool. Wow. But yeah, look, what I've learned from life is have a dream, go for it, take the knocks, bounce back, and keep going. If you have a dream, you'll make it happen. And I did. I ended up losing it in the
Absolutely.
end, but
So when you decided to relocate to New Zealand, you had two goals. to get a job as a commercial pilot
Yep.
and build a fishing lodge on a lake. Can you speak about the unfolding of this amazing dream and your beautiful luxury lodge, Solitaire? How did that
Right.
all happen?
Well, what happened by accident? I'd invested when I left the Air Force. I got a golden bowler. I got a sum of money, £5,000, which I sent home to my parents. And I said, "Look, buy something, buy me a home." Well, they bought me two rotten old, well, not rotten, they were the very first Lockwood cabins ever built, and they were built at Lake Tarawera. They were on the market. I said, "Okay, buy them. I'll be my first bit of land in New Zealand." And a young guy called Hans wanted to rent one. So my mother organized Hans's renting one. So I rented both cabins to my parents because I was now in Antigua, having fun, letting my property develop. But really, what happened next was when Hans came to me and said, "Look, I want to live in this cabin. I want to buy it from you." I said to him, "Well, take me somewhere or show me something which is better. This is my retirement plan." And he said, "Okay, I'll take you out to Lake Tarawera, which I'd never been to." And there was this old rundown house. And the story of how I got it is extraordinary. It was a deceased estate. The will was just to whoever. There were no family. There was no inheritance. So it was handed over to the New Zealand insurance company to deal with. And I said, "Wow, if I could buy this, that would be my dream lodge." So I was then flying a little amphibian aircraft and flying home to Maleko Karaka, landing, staying with my parents, enjoying flying back to the Ardmore where I had the flying school. And for 8 months, I would just pop up to New Zealand Insurance and speak to Peter Maloney, who was in charge of the disposing of this deceased estate. "Yep, Reg, we'll have a decision soon. The plan is to have it auctioned." Okay, so put my name on the list, and I was number 13. For 8 months, I was popping down. No, we have no decision yet. And finally, on the day I flew down, I borrowed my father's car, drove into Rotorua, and went up to Peter Maloney and said, "By the way, have you got an answer on the disposal of this beautiful property?" "By God," he says, "you just walked in at the right time. I've got 13 letters here. It'll save me a 4-cent stamp. I'll give you a copy of the decision." I opened the letter on the spot. It simply said, "There will be no auction. We have valued the property at $35,000, which was in those days, quite expensive property for a batch or a property." And I thought, if I sold everything, I could buy it. So I rang my lawyer and said, "Please sign immediately today an unconditional agreement to purchase at their price they've offered, and I see if they'll be accepted by the board." It took them 3 weeks to accept. It was accepted. I now had to sell my properties. So I sold Hans one, I sold the other four, sold the flight school, jumped in my car, and drove down to the dilapidated old home and started to build Solitaire Lodge. And that's a lovely story in itself. And it eventually became the most, popular, the most beautiful lodge, fishing lodge. But then, of course, you see, I was into fishing, but my guests weren't. They wanted luxury, good food, good wine, and a lovely place to stay. So I ended up not being a fishing lodge as such, a lodge from which you could go fishing, but it dealt to the what they call them, the doers, the uppers, and the boomers, and whatever you. And I ended up with a big article in Hideaway Report as being the only exclusive place in New Zealand back in 1974. Wow, it was incredible. And that was another good bit of luck. And then I had the Fair Go show. That's right. Because I kind of got this property without going to auction, everybody thought I'd stolen it. Then became the number one enemy of the Tarawera Ratepayers Association, who thought I was really, you know, somehow I cheated. That was without a doubt, without was incredible property on the lake that was gone to an English Pom who wasn't even a Kiwi, and it caused all sorts of strife. So they took me to court. The first court case I lost. They had 150 objectors, and the council were very unhappy about me turning it into a luxury lodge. So I went to another lawyer, asked for an appeal. Cost me a good lawyer, good time lawyer. My first lawyer was a bit young, didn't understand. We went to appeal, and then upped the numbers from 150 objectors to 250. Where they got the other objectors from, I've got no idea. but they did not want to have a commercial property built on that lake. It was their private lake. It was basically owned by a lot of the wealthy families of Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch. And here was this English kid buying this beautiful property. Well, long story short, they started cutting off my water, and I had someone said, "Go to Fair Go." There's a program on Fair Go which deals with people, bad neighbors. I said, "I'd never heard of it." I applied. Brian Edwards was the host. I did the whole opening show of Fair Go back in 1974, the second ever broadcast. They never had it recorded. And I had the whole program to myself, fighting these locals who wanted me not to exist. They were embarrassed. They didn't turn up. Brian Edwards was the devil's advocate, arguing on their behalf. I won the whole show, won the hearts and minds of all the Kiwis who were watching me fight and battle. And today, unfortunately, they still begrudge me buying that property, thinking I cheated, I lied, or whatever. No, I was just lucky that the day I walked in, I was handed a letter with a decision and made a commitment right then and there. I had to borrow the money for the deposit off my lawyer. Anyway, that's another lovely story about how I was on Fair Go for the first program back in 1974, I think it was, and now we're losing it. I've been a great fan of Fair Go ever since, but now it looks like it's going to go off air. But that was
Yeah,
a
it
lucky
does.
break. Lucky break.
Also, Reg, can you talk about when they turned off your water supply when you
That's right.
bought
Yep,
Solitaire?
that's right. Now, having won that bid and told them I was going to build a lodge, the water supply for the lodge was built by the original owner who owned the whole of that lagoon and tried farming that failed and decided he had this big area of lake. He would section it off into quarter-acre sections and sell it as a property developer. But the water supply to the main house at the end of the peninsula came from behind the house up at the hill and came down past all these other properties, which the deal was if they paid for one of these bits of land, they would have access to the water supply. Well, by 1978 or whatever it was, when I finally got permission to build, they decided they didn't like me, didn't want me at all. They were going to cut my water off. So they did. That's right. And that's what led to the Fair Go program, cutting off my water, trying to not stop me building, and the Fair Go show. Well, that cemented that love hate, because I was embarrassing these big wealthy families of Auckland about having this beautiful property, and that's what helped me win the day with the Fair Go show. They reinstated my water. Um, that's right. When we went to council the first time, I lost 150 objectors. The mayor said, "My God, they don't want that to happen, so I'll vote against you." By the time they'd increased it to 250, I had a new lawyer representing me, and he opened up the whole hearing by saying, the only people allowed to object to this person are the first 150. So the first lot of you come in can leave now. You're not allowed to say anything. You're not part of the reheal. And the second thing is, nobody realizes, but that property was zoned travelers accommodation, an automatic right of building. There was no need to go through town planning. It was in the council rules that you could build a hospital, travelers accommodation, and a few other things. And so they said, look, even the 150, the only people who can object to this person's plan are his neighbors. And there weren't any neighbors who were prepared to objecting. They were all joining the group. So there were no objectors, permission granted, end of case. And that was another thing too. The mere fact that even my first lawyer didn't realize the town planning had zoned that particular property travelers accommodation, and building a tourist lodge was travelers accommodation. Another bit of luck. Gosh, yeah, that was something that happened really.
So, Reg,
Luck
tell us
was with
about
me.
your beautiful lodge. Tell us about Solitaire. What sort of clientele did you have? What did you offer?
Right.
And any stories that stand out at that time?
Okay. Well, of course, I was now having to build this beautiful lodge on this beautiful location and attract fishermen. But Tarawera, the market for fishing, was the big American fly fishing market. And it wasn't a fly fishing lake. You really went out trolling with a boat and a rod and a line and dragging a lure, but you were catching big trout, 10 pounders. Now, these were unheard of to the average American fisherman. But what I didn't realize was, although I was focusing on the fishing market, people who were non-fishermen were writing me, "We don't fish, but we want to just come and stay at a nice place." So I got an architect, Roger Walker, to build me my first three luxury suites. And he designed them. I modified them a bit, but they were just stunning, beautiful rooms with views across the lake, absolutely gorgeous accommodation. And I wasn't getting fishermen, I was getting rich and famous guests, who just wanted somewhere nice to stay, which they could go fishing, but they were more interested in the Maori history of the lake or going to Rotorua's, a tourist shop, going to Maori carvings. But that's right. I then had a couple of Americans come out from Hideaway Report searching for destinations for the first time that New Zealand was open to the American market. And I somehow, I don't know how, but I got chosen to host them. He was Andrew Harper of Andrew Harper's Hideaway Report, an exclusive magazine. And my first wife was a girl called Elizabeth, and she was a good little cook, and she was a lovely hostess. And the two of us hosted this couple from America to discover when they got back to America, they entered me in this exclusive travel magazine called Hideaway Report as one of three destinations in New Zealand. There was Elton Lodge in Auckland, me at Solitaire, and a lodge called Wharikaha near Wellington. And suddenly I had the rich clients coming in. And one story goes like this. In the beginning, I had a guy come off the Queen, one of the big cruise ships, one of the first cruise ships come down, and said, "I hear you've got a lodge. I want to come out and just visit you." I said, "Come on out." I had just opened these brand new suites. I was charging $60 a night, all up, food, accommodation, and fishing. And he came out and said, "God, son, you're charging $60 a night for this beautiful place, including food? Hell, if you charged 150, I think you were still too cheap." "Really?" I said. "Yeah." He said, "I'm sorry I haven't booked in," but he had booked on one of the big tours. I thought, okay, I'll charge 150. Overnight, I raised my tariff from $60 to 150, and the rest is history. I was suddenly in Hyder Report, working my little butt off, entertaining people, not doing much fishing. And that's another blow to my thing. Sadly, Liz left me, and that was the end of that. And I had to struggle on my own, building that lodge up, and that with management, with staff, a second marriage, which was sad, but there's another story. But really, the things that happened to me were just like, I don't know, luck. But then luck is, well, I think I said, is imagination, opportunity, and timing. And I was just lucky with my opportunities and my timing that I ended up building this beautiful property. You can go on the internet and have a look at the lodge now. Solitaire Lodge. Just look at Google. Look what a beautiful place it really is. Charging $2,000 a night. It's charging 150. Wow. Yeah. And
You
now I've retired
say,
to go
you
to bed.
say, Reg, luck is imagination, opportunity and timing, all
Yeah.
coming together at the same time. Would you say in your life you've had inner guidance or a knowing on the next steps to take and how to proceed? Do you think you were divinely guided or what you created was a destiny?
I honestly try and find an answer to that. I was just a young lad dreaming of doing something and did it. But I had so much opportunity and timing all happening at once. And that was when I suddenly realized that luck, you find your luck by being there and doing that. And in our lifetime, many opportunities will pass by us and we ignore them or forget about them or say, I can't be bothered. But I was grasping them. Oh, that's a good idea. And they came into my head, like even going to Antigua after leaving the RAF, after leaving the Flying Doctor Service, going out as a beach bum just to the hell of it. And suddenly I was in an occupation at a luxury hotel, meeting the rich and famous and learning how to look after them, how to host them. Because I was hosting manager at Gully Bay. And I met some very rich people, some very famous people, some beautiful movie stars. And I was building confidence that I was equal to them, but without being subservient, without being overcome. I don't know. I just did things and they happened. Sure, there were some bad bits, but you're dead right. I just followed a thought and made it happen. Maybe I was lucky.
Which
Maybe I
is
was
beautiful.
adventurous. Maybe I was. Lucky. There we go. But
Well, you might
anyway,
have had a guardian angel walking along beside you, Reg.
probably did. That's another story. Have I got a guardian angel? I don't know. Yeah, now that I'm getting old and grey and everything else, I'm starting to suffer, the idiosyncrasies of aging, but I'm happy. And now I've got to write about it properly. I've given you a draft pretty well, but there's so much more detail, so much more experience, so much
So,
sadness
Reg,
too.
getting
Yeah,
getting back to Solitaire, you went on over the next 20 years to winning 2 tourism awards
yeah.
and accepting the accolade of being the pioneer of the luxury lodges in New Zealand, a
It's
non-Kiwi with initiative and drive, and also featuring in a TV program called Lap of Luxury. Would you like to talk
That's
about that?
yeah. Now, last year, the new owners of my lodge, which had been operating now, rang me up and said, "Look, Reg, we're on this TV show called Lap of Luxury. You built Solitaire. You know all about it. Will you come and front the program?" Yeah, I'd love to. Okay, we'll fly you down. We'll put you up, feed you, and host you, and you be the presentator of our portion because there were 12 lodges in New Zealand on that program. These are super luxury lodges like Blanket Bay, Kauri Cliffs, um, Helens Bay. These are all owned by multi-millionaire overseas people who bought them to entertain their friends. They weren't really in the tourist market. So I came down, and there it was. That's on YouTube now. Lap of Luxury, solitaire version. And I was just telling him how I built the lodge and how I hosted it and how it fitted in with the Maoris. And of all the competition out there, all the lodges were having something unique. What was unique about me? I was the very first, a luxury lodge aimed for and built for the target market out of Hideaway Report, which was an exclusive magazine. It was incredible that they sent a couple out to interview me with my first wife, Elizabeth. And that was my big, big, big thing. The Fair Go show was more domestic market, but it did help. Yeah. But certainly the Lap of Luxury was me competing with a whole bunch of other lodges, but I was introduced as the very first one built from scratch for the high end. Going from $60 a night to 150 to 200. I mean, I was raising the tariff as people kept coming and saying, "You're too cheap." There are people with money who like to spend it. And I tapped into that market by making myself expensive. I was actually getting business, but I delivered. Um, yeah, that was hard work, but it was good. I was a good host.
And so you now own Song of the Tui in Golden
Well, this,
Bay in
right.
your
Well, this is not
retirement
how.
years.
Yeah,
And I've
I've
had the
actually.
privilege of staying at this beautiful lodge nestled on the hillside,
Yeah.
overlooking the sea, and spending time with you and Princess, your beautiful dog,
And where is she now? Oh, she's in the lounge in front of the fire. Yeah,
which was
yeah. This is
lovely.
this. Is
So, Reg, are you still taking guests in your lodge or not
no,
now?
no, really. I've now developed this neuropathy, which is affecting my balance, my legs. I really can't cook with safety in the kitchen because I'm a danger to myself and everybody else. So I'm not looking upon it as my retirement home, entertaining friends and family. I love guests coming to stay, but I can no longer deliver the standard of hosting which these people want. When I opened up, I was the most expensive place in Golden Bay. I was charging $300 a night for a bed and breakfast. The average was 70, but I was still capable of doing it, but not anymore. I can't give that quality or attention. But I'm getting old. Hey, age happens. So,
So, Reg,
so
what would you say the secret is to hosting in a lodge and all that that entails? What sort of things do you have to look for or deliver on that are important?
I think what I loved was entertaining people, just talking about my past, being their host, caring for them as an equal, not a subservient or superior, just an equal. I mean, when I had Margaret Thatcher's marketing manager come down, so Tom somebody, I was just, hey, he called me Tom. Yeah, you call me Reg. That was that attitude. Um, and that's another story. when I came here, Margaret Thatcher was fighting the Falklands War. Back home in England, I was a Conservative, and I wrote her a thank you note saying, "Dear Margaret, well, dear Prime Minister, I congratulate you on being re-elected after the Falklands War." 3 weeks later, I got a letter from Downing Street signed by Margaret Thatcher. I've got it hanging in my office. And I thought, come on, this can't be from her. Maybe it's just a Romeo letter. Her marketing manager came following that year, much later. And I said, "Oh my God, you're Margaret Thatcher's marketing manager for her return to Parliament?" He said, "Yep, I've got this letter from her." "Oh my God," he said, "that is very special." She was known to write individually to people who she wanted to. You wrote her a letter, you congratulated her, and she thanked you. And that's still hanging here today. It's priceless because she's now dead and gone. Yeah, I think what I don't I enjoyed what I was doing and I gave it my all, but every person was an equal. They weren't superior or inferior. And I think that's what was important. I was their talker, their counselor, their marketing, whatever. I was their conversation piece. And luckily, I had done so much traveling and had so many different adventures, I could enthrall them with my own after dinner talks and so on. I think that's what it was. I was just a very personal host, a gift I had of personality. Not anybody could do that. I think that was my luck. Yeah.
I would agree with that, Reg. So were you also flying people around at that stage when you had your lodge?
Well, no, no. When I had my lodge, I abandoned the flight school. That today actually is quite famous. It's called Ardmore Flying School, owned and operated by Liz Needham, the only female Spitfire demonstration pilot in the world. Wow. She's just recently sold it and retired to Wanaka in charge of the Warbirds. Yeah, and she owned it for 40 years. I only owned it for about two and a half. And she's turned it into one of the most magnificent. You Google it, Ardmore Flying School. That's another legacy. Yeah, I think I got two legacies: Solitaire Lodge, Ardmore Flying School. That's something I created, something went on to be bigger than me. And I look back with pride. They were just happening. I did something I enjoyed. I enjoyed flying. And when I gave it up, I enjoyed looking after people and chatting to them and talking to them and taking them out and just being a buddy, right? Yeah.
That's
So I
really
think it's a
beautiful.
personality thing. It's
Yes,
a personality thing.
yes. So
Yes, it
how did
was.
you get people round and about, Reg? What was the mode of transport?
Well, at the time, they all came in by car or limousine or helicopter. This was how they arrived at my lodge, and from there on, I look after them and send them back in their car or their coach or their helicopter. It was really quite interesting. I never drove them anywhere. But that's right. When I lost Solitaire, I built another lodge called Casimir, and I ran that for 10 years. And I was able to carry on in a whole different attitude and different environment. It was purely a big country house that I ran for 10 years. I entertained Joan Collins, the whole of Coronation Street. And once again, I was up there entertaining the rich and famous and sold all that when I eventually decided to quit Head and come down here to the South Island and fell in love with little pre-built bed and breakfast. So I've been here 17 years. The
Wow.
other day I dawned, oh my God, 17 years I've been here.
Well, so
Almost as long as some
how do you spell Casimir so people can look that up?
Cassimir. It's the Polish word for peace. Casimir. It was Polish. It's a Polish word, K, Casimir, with the soft C, Casimir, and is the Polish word for peace. And I named it after my mother's brother, who was my mother's mother was married to a Polish count. They had a son, my mother's brother, and called him Reginald Casimir Bolin, and I named it after him just because it sounded a nice name. I had no idea why. Casimir was just beautiful. And today now it's been taken off the market. It's a private lodge, but it still is on the internet as Casimir if you Google it. Yeah. So that followed Solitaire. And that really was the last of my entertaining accommodation places. I've had nobody rich and famous here except you. All right, there you go.
I
Yeah.
got called a film star today. I could hardly believe it myself.
Gosh, that was fun. Yeah. Yep, here am I.
So
I
you
hope I've
you
entertained all
now
you guys. Are you still listening? Has anybody left? Are they bored? Oh, it's still all there.
They're
All the other.
still they're still all here, Reg. You
I
now
must
own
say,
Song of the Tui in
yeah,
Golden Bay. And as I said, I've had the privilege of staying there. You're also a famous artist and have had several beautiful exhibitions.
yeah.
You like
Well, I've got a website.
focusing on spontaneous creations,
Yeah,
mixing acrylics and oils, which I found very interesting, many with a
yeah,
marine theme. Can you
yeah.
speak about your love of art and what you love to do?
Okay, I was given my first oil paints at age I recall, I was about 7 years old by a called Harry Brown, who was a friend of my father, and he gave me a piece of canvas and a painting to copy. And so here you are, off you go. And it was a marinescape of a boat on a beach, and I copied it. And from then on, I just started developing my own mark. And then I just became an outsider. I had no art training. I had no skill. I just happened to like painting and just copied things a lot. But today now with my neuropathy, I can't haven't got control of my hands. So I'm kind of throwing paints on canvases and pretend to be a Jackson Pollock. But I'm having fun. They make mixtures. I showed you my favorite painting of all. It's my lovely marinescape. That was when I was painting, art. Now throwing painting on canvas. Well, look, Jackson Pollock is famous, tens of millions of dollars for his, but he was an original. He was the first to do it. Like Picasso, when you're the first start of something, today Banksy, his efforts are worth fortunes just because he started it. I haven't started anything else. So my legacy will always be Solitaire and the Flying School and aging gracefully as best I can. Yeah. But the
And
painting is
so
just
what,
something I had a gift for. Again, creative imagination.
yes, absolutely. And can you say why it's a marine theme mostly?
I think I love water, love sailing. When I was in the RAF, I won the Coastal Command Championship, the Flying Training Championship. In fact, the other day I thought if I'd come to New Zealand at the height of my sailing goodness, I could have been a member of the America's Cup. But that I was good. I was a good yachtsman, a good racer. But no, I had too much to do. I think really one of my disappointments, I had so many irons in the fire. I never became master of any, but I did bloody good. And I'm happy I was a variety of person. I never had a steady job. I was always self-employed. The only time I worked for anybody was the Queen in the RAF as a serving officer. The Queen was my boss, technically. After that, I was on my own, flying in Africa, building a flight school, building a lodge. Yeah. So really, I was never a good employee. I was always self-employed.
So,
Yeah.
Reg, I know you have family. Has anyone in your family followed in your footsteps or in a way
Yeah.
similar?
Right. Well, my son has. He's now a pilot with Air New Zealand. He's got a career which I wished I had. I'd love to have been an airline pilot. Never was. My daughter, she works for ACC. She just got married. They were happy. Danny's back flying again after being grounded with a bad back, but he's got that cured. I envy him. He's in Honolulu at the moment, whole week there. But he's heading for his captaincy. He's got my dream job. I always wanted to be an airline pilot, but never made there. But I got flying out of my system now. I miss it, but that's cool. No, I'm very happy with the life I've lived. Whatever I've achieved, I've been quite selfish with, I think. Anyway, um, I'm here now. Yeah, come on up, be my guest, be my friend. I'm not taking paying guests, just people who like to come and stay out in the hangar
That's really
doors.
sweet.
Yeah.
Getting back to when you were in Africa and Kenya, um, could you talk a little about some of the stories of the the people you were rescuing? What was the life like for a
Okay.
lot of the
Well, yeah.
Kenyans at that time?
Right. Now, the East African Flying Doctor Service was put together by a person called Michael Wood, who lived in Africa, who lived in Kenya. He had a farm, and he was a plastic surgeon. Anyway, he realized that this was a good career for him to be a white doctor serving African people for no fee, living on charity. Millions of dollars were flying coming in from American sponsors, German sponsors. The aircraft were all paid for by a charity, and I was lucky to get him as a job just for a short time. And the things I had to do was go out on three big safaris. One was to a big white hunter who was a famous film star who was shot by his gunner. He did one thing whenever you go out hunting with a guide, you shoot your animal and make sure your guide makes certain it's dead before you go near it. But he was so excited, he ran forward. I think it was a lion, and it reared up in its death throat and ripped him apart, and he was killed. Somebody shot the the sorry, that's right. The gun holder shot the lion, um, and I had to fly out and pick up his body and fly him back to Nairobi. Another one was a job where I had to take a poor African who was suffering a mental disorder, strapped to a stretcher, put it in the aircraft, and bit the handle of the door and had him in the handle. That was another story. Um, I was involved in all the operations as a third hand. An operating crew was a doctor, a pilot, a nurse, and an anaesthetist. Now the poor pilot was nothing to do whilst I was on surgery. So I was called into surgery to help to hold this. I helped with this just about every operation on the human body, and that's in the book Flying the Angels on Runway 07. I happened to fly the author and a photographer and ended up on the front cover of the book, sitting in the cockpit with Michael Wood, the founder. It's my classic. Yeah, I've got it on my shelf up there. You might
So
find it in the library.
what is the name of the book again?
I was just going, I'll get it off my shelf. Here it is. I don't know if it'll come up on camera, but here we go. Oh. Yep. Now this is the book, Angels
Could
on
lift it
Runway.
up just a wee bit. Thank you.
Can you see it?
By Barry Wynn, Angels on
Very
Runway
well. Yep. It's in the
07.
library here, so it might be in your library. It's in some libraries. Angels on Runway 07, the story of the East African Flying Doctor Service. I just happened to be out there as a volunteer pilot and flew the author around. I got a picture of me in the operating theatre having a. I don't know if this will come out, but that's me dressed in a surgical gown. Can I? Is it showing up?
Yes. Which one is
Yeah,
you?
I'm a. Yeah, that's me. Hang on, upside down. Yeah, that's me there. Oh, oh shit! It's all flying out. Oh, these are some of the photographs stuck in the back. Yeah, that's me there. If I can, is that coming up? My
Yes.
finger is. Yep, with a mask on, a surgical mask. Yeah, another bit of
Fascinating.
adventure.
So
That was another.
you've had some amazing stories as part of your history, haven't you?
I think I've lived a full life. I'm happy to disappear now and grow the. Oh, yeah, that's another picture of the crew. Is that showing up?
Can you lift it up? Lift it up more. That's it.
Okay. Oh, there's the camera. Yeah, of course. That's a picture of me with the
Fabulous.
crew. Yeah,
Wonderful.
and that was the aircraft we flew, the Cessna 206.
Oh, beautiful.
I
Beautiful.
Yeah, I've got to tell a story. I don't know whether ever who wants to read it, but oh my gosh, I've forgotten those photographs were in there. I've got so much junk. I'm gonna have to clean out my cupboard one day. But yes, my legacy.
So, Reg, is there anything else you would like to finish on before we open up to questions? Is there any
No?
story you'd like to tell or message you'd like
Oh,
to give?
no, I think there's just so many. It's hard to pick one specific. Um, I mean, something like yeah, I had a lovely lady fisherman, and I fell in the river, lost myself almost. No, I think I'm happy to answer questions now from the people. I'll give them a rough sketch. So, by means, far away.
Well, firstly, I'd just love to thank you for your remarkable stories. your story. History in the
No.
making, Reg. Stories are valuable. They teach us of adventure, courage, dreams, and goals. Thank you for sharing some of your stories with us today.
Much
So,
delighted. Very,
if
very
anyone would
flattered. And very,
like to, if anyone would like to get in touch with you, or maybe purchase some of your paintings, if you do have any for sale, where do they go?
go to my website, Reg Turner Artists. They're all on there. All sorts of pictures of what I've done. So go to www.regturnerartists, and there's my website. It's a whole bunch of paintings, which are still there. I haven't actually sold many, but it gives you some idea of what I've done. Yeah. I
That's
think it was a
wonderful.
hobby more than a profession. But
So, would anyone like to ask a question of Reg with his
yeah,
amazing stories from way, way back? If
absolutely.
you
I'm
do,
happy to go.
just
Am
raise
I
your
still being?
hand.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're ready to go.
Does anyone have a question? Lou. Hi, Lou.
Hi, Jude. Thank you very much. And it's been a fascinating story. It's absolutely beautiful. It does resonate with me all along for different things, the flying, the paintings, the adventure, the service to others, or the joy of being around people. So, Rich, really, it's beautiful. It is absolutely you are a living, walking school of experiences in life. Um, so thank you very much for that. I think that you have um, a, a lot to offer to many people. Um, the only question that I have is related to your paintings. I would like to know a bit more about this inspiration and how can you relate that to the passion that you had from the beginning in flying? Do you see any connection between flying and painting? Perhaps the free of these two things, the free spirit. What is the connection, and what has driven you to paint uh, marinescapes, anything that relates to water?
I don't quite. It's a very bad line, and I haven't got my hearing aids in. Could you just be specific? Or what was your
Yep,
question actually? Oh,
correct.
hang on. What?
Yeah.
Lou was asking about your connection with your love of painting and flying. Is there a
Oh, right.
connection between the two on your passion for both?
No, no, I've never thought about that. I've just lost you, so I don't know where you've all gone. I'll hit something again. Yeah, but no, look, I think painting was a hobby, was an expression of me doing something. I can't connect it with flying because none of my paintings have a flying image. They do have a lot of sailing and boating in them, or water and painting. So my connection with my seascapes is my connection with sailing and boating, but never flying. I think a lot of my abstract too is pure imagination. Yeah, look, I honestly cannot locate or connect any of them. They were spontaneous. They were just happening.
With your beautiful artwork, did you ever draw a fish in the water?
No, no, I never did. Isn't that weird?
Because you wanted a fishing lodge, didn't you?
I know. No, I never. Oh, well, I think way back in my school days, I just do a sketch of a trout. Um, I tried a painting of a trout way back, but no, I didn't realize there was a connection there. Did I make a vision and end up with a fishing lodge way back before I even? I never thought about that. Interesting. Okay. Somehow I might have created something, not knowing what it was.
You may have too. So I would just like to thank you so much
Well, I
for
feel very
coming on
honored being
to
invited. Yeah, this
to
is
a
my very
cosmic.
first. Yeah. Well, let me. Yeah, go on.
I'd like to thank you for coming on a Cosmic Cuppa with Jude. You've been absolutely delightful. I know you have so many stories and so much to share with so many people. You come from the heart. You want everyone to be in a good place. And I know the work you've done through the years has been quite miraculous and quite amazing. So thank you so much for coming on, Reg. Really appreciate it.
Well, I enjoyed sharing what little I have, and thank you for the honor.
Thank you.
The honor of
So
having a couple.
if
Yeah.
you're
Well,
watching this on Skype, I beg your pardon, if you're watching this, yes, on Skype, on YouTube,
yeah.
please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, as always,
Oh,
peace
thank
on
you.
earth. It starts with you. It starts with me. So good night, everyone, and God bless.
Thank you. God bless from here.